All right, so now that we've bedded the rings and we've got a nice fit to the scope and the rings, it's a completely stress-free fit. We're gonna focus on leveling the scope properly with the reticle and the rifle and the scope tube all being in relation with each other. And to do that, I use a tool that I think works the best. It's the best of any of the tools I've found. It's from EXD Engineering. I ordered it off of Brownells. It's a very inexpensive tool. It's like $40. But what I like about it is it allows you to index off of the two round objects that you're trying to line up with each other, and that is the barrel and the scope. So what it does is when you set it on the barrel, this thing slides back and forth for different scope heights and different diameter scopes. You place it on the barrel and then you place this on the top of the scope, and now I've got an index point to work off of my two round objects, and it lets me know, are they canted at all in relation to each other. So because it's got a little bubble level here, now that I've got it lined up properly, I tighten it down, and as you can see, the bubble level is off. So now we're going to tilt the rifle to where the bubble level is lined up properly. And what that's going to give me is a perfect line between the bore axis of the scope tube and the bore axis of the rifle barrel. So now I know I've got a perfect line with the fall of gravity right through the two. Now there's one other variable that I don't know, which is the reticle lined up with that? Well, there's two ways to check that. If you have the ability to do this outside in your backyard, you've got enough room to do it, this slot on the device allows you to look through your scope, and you can set up a plumb bob, which is just a line hanging from a weighted line from a tree limb or whatever, and you let it stabilize, and that's the fall of gravity. So you can look through your scope right through that slot, and then you twist your scope to line the reticle up with your plumb bob. And that gives you now 3 points of reference. You've got a perfectly level rifle and scope combination with a reticle that bisects right through the bore of the scope and the bore of the rifle, and it gives you a perfectly leveled system. So I hang a plumb on the wall 6 or 7 feet away, and then I shine a flashlight back through it, and it projects the image on the wall, and then so now I know I've got my rifle leveled, then I can adjust it, and then I mount the ring caps on top to lock it in place. And that gives me, now everything is in relation with each other. Now we're going to dim the lights down so I can shine the flashlight back through the scope, and then we're going to check the image on the wall to make sure that the reticle is lined up with a plumb that I've got hanging on the wall.
Perfect. Let's get to that.
Okay, now before we get started leveling the reticle, I want to recheck to make sure that the rifle and the scope are square with gravity, which it's perfect right now. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and take the flashlight and I'm going to shine it back through the scope, and you're going to look at the projection on the wall there, and you can see my plumb bob line on the right, which is obviously going to be straight up and down with gravity because gravity is pulling it down. And if you notice, the reticle is canted. So as I move the scope within the rings, you can see what I'm trying to achieve, which is to get the reticle straight up and down with the plumb bob. And by doing that and making it completely squared and flush with that, now I've got a relationship between the reticle, the scope, and the rifle, and it's all squared off with gravity. So what we're trying to achieve is a completely squared rifle with gravity and a completely squared reticle with gravity.
Yeah, and I'm coming from the position where I didn't even know this existed until this discussion came up on the Facebook page. And I'm kind of wowed by it, to be honest. It's one of those things where when you don't know what you don't know.
That's exactly it. And look, nobody did until somebody figured it out. And then now, and it's just a matter of learning and understanding why it's important. And which is, like you said, the removal of tolerance stacking issues. And does it make a huge difference between the way your original video did it and this? It might not be huge. It might not be a very large difference. But we play a game of not very much. A miss by 1/8 of an inch is still a miss. And my game is to try and remove all the variables I can as easy as possible. And this is free to do. This doesn't cost anything. Okay, so now you saw how we've got the reticle lined up flush with gravity. We still have the rifle lined up flush with gravity. The next step in the process would be to torque our rings down. One of the things I wanted to mention that I forgot to say when we had the lights out was when you do this, you want to go and zoom the scope all the way out so it gives you your as big as image as possible and you see the most of your reticle as possible. If you're zoomed all the way in, it gives you a very small area of your reticle and it'll look a little fuzzy and it'll be hard to pick up on the wall. Okay, so once we've got this, now we've got this in place, obviously I don't want to disturb it. One of the things that you have to think about, depending on the style of your rings, is when you start to torque these back down, you have to make sure that you're applying the torque evenly to each side and spread the torque out over a wider range. So if you go to, let's say you torque these to 20 inch-pounds, you don't want to start on one side and just go all the way to 20 inch-pounds on one side and then grab this corner and go to 20 inch-pounds. So I'll start with just a little bit on one side and then I'll move over to the next one and a little bit and a little bit and a little bit, and I keep spreading it around so that I get a more even clamping force on the rings. But more importantly, it also, if you just clamp one side down hard, it's going to spin the scope inside the rings and it's going to ruin the work you just did. The whole idea is keeping this level. And in the end, are you going to gain large amounts of, big differences and changes at distance, and if it's off of a degree or a degree and a half? I haven't studied to know exactly how much it is. I know it's not huge amounts, and if I haven't removed all the variables that I can control, that are easily controlled and demonstratable, then how do I know why I missed? Was it a bad wind call? Is it just poor reloading techniques? Was it a bad trigger break? So I need to remove all the things, and now when I set my rifle up this way, I know that's one less thing I have to think about.
From my video last week talking about this is the proper way to mount a scope, there's a better way. This is a better way. It gets you more consistency, less stress on your scope and on your rings by bedding, and just a better overall precise package for your long-range shooting, and I would highly recommend this method. Absolutely. So thanks for watching Precision Rifle Network today. Jeff, thanks for meeting with me.
Absolutely, man, my pleasure. Thanks.
Tune in next week for another great video.